Hi, and welcome back to my channel. My name's Brett. I'm a Canadian who's been living in Paris for the last 5 months, and fitness is something that's really important to me. So today I thought it'd be helpful to walk through how I stay active and motivated after uprooting my entire life and routine and moving across the world. When I lived in Vancouver, I had a pretty set routine of working out about every Monday to Friday. I was on an app called ClassPass, and at the time it was great because I could go to different studios and I had a group of friends who would message each other and choose different classes to go to. So it felt like I had a little bit of a community and support, and we would push each other to go to different classes that sometimes were a little outside of our comfort zone, but it was something that I really liked to do. When I first moved to Paris, I definitely felt a lack of motivation. All of a sudden my routine changed, which of course it would when you move to a completely different city, but it just felt really different. So sometimes I would do workouts in my apartment, or I would ask my boyfriend to work out with me because I just felt like I didn't feel the drive or the desire to want to move my body and work out every day. It was just kind of a transition period and it was not in any set routine. So I kind of had to build up a routine. I did still have some ClassPass credits. When we first moved here, we lived in the outskirts of the city, so there weren't really many studios around. So after 2 weeks, we moved into the city, and that's when I was able to try 2 studios. I did one spin studio, which I didn't love. I probably should have given it more time, but it was just a completely different structure to the spin style that I was used to, and the class was taught entirely in French. And if you know spin, you know it's a very fast-paced class, so for the most part, I just didn't really know what was going on. And then the second experience was at a Legree-based studio, which I really did like. I actually did work at Legree West when I was back in Vancouver. So I think what I liked about it is, even though the class was in French, it's a slower paced class. So even though that instructor was also in French, I found that the style of Legree in Vancouver and Legree here was quite similar. Even though there was slightly different moves, I still knew the whole structure of the class, so I did really enjoy that. But obviously, to save a bit of money, I let my ClassPass expire, and at that point I realized I needed to go back to where I started working out and getting really into at-home fitness was on YouTube. So when we moved into this apartment, I made it a goal to try and hit my regular workout schedule, which was every Monday to Friday morning. I used to have friends and family members that would text each other classes to YouTube videos and keep each other accountable. So it was kind of like a little support group. And I didn't necessarily have that because when I was working out, my family was asleep back in Vancouver. So what I decided to do was post a story on my Instagram and say, I'm doing this workout, here's the link to the YouTube video, and maybe I could have a little bit of a community through it. The main reason why I do it is because it keeps me accountable, and I know sometimes it's really difficult to even choose a workout. So I find I've really learned how to listen to my body and see how I feel that day. If I have more energy, I do a cardio-based workout. If I have sore muscles, I'll do a stretch or Pilates. Maybe somebody feels the same way, or they just don't want to have to choose the exercise, so maybe they just do the same ones as me. So that's how I started doing that. And some of my favorite creators are MadFit. She is somebody I've been following for a really long time. Actually, during the lockdown and pandemic, when I was living at my parents' house, my mom and sister, like I was saying, that little support group that we had, the friends and family, would text each other videos for every day of the week. So I would choose Fridays or whatever day of the week, and that's how we would do it, and mainly did MadFit classes. So I've been taking her classes for, I don't even know, I guess on and off 4 years now, which is kind of crazy. I can't even keep track anymore, but I've been doing her classes for a long time, and I think what I noticed the most was when I was cross training. That means doing different types of workouts all the time. That's when I started to notice a big change in my body. I was feeling stronger and I was leaning out a little bit. So that's something that I really loved the result from following her classes all the time. And when I was here, I just realized I should pick that up again. So I started following Maddie, and she's definitely my favorite. I also have discovered, or friends have sent me a couple suggestions for some Pilates recommendations. Move with Nicole is a really great creator as well. She does Pilates. There's beginner, intermediate, and experienced classes. She always has a beautiful backdrop, either I think maybe it's her home in a backdrop of a pool, or she's at the beach. She's just so lovely and calm, and I really like her classes. It's definitely something to push towards because she's very flexible and is very good at Pilates. So I'm never quite right at the same level as her, but I do really like pushing myself with hers. I do change it up quite often, and I'll try a brand new crater that I've never tried before. So I try to mix and match, but those are the two that I fall back on mostly. For equipment, when I first moved here, of course, I had no equipment. When I was working out at home, I had a set of 5-pound and 10-pound dumbbells. Of course, I couldn't pack those in my luggage, so I had no equipment when I first got here. Luckily, our landlord had a yoga mat that I've been able to use, so that was the only thing that was already here, and luckily I didn't have to buy one. But since then, I realized obviously there's a ton of workouts that you can do with your body weight, which is amazing, but sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of extra light equipment that I could travel with, or if I had to move again, it's not that difficult to bring home with me, but it just adds a little bit more spice and burn to certain exercises. So the first one I got was this set of loop bands from Amazon. This is the light one. It's just like a bit stretchier. I don't use this one as often, but that's a good option if you're doing kickbacks or something where you need to have a bit more motion. And then this is the medium band. So it's a little bit harder to pull apart. This one I use probably the most, I would say, if you're doing anything like a squat, or you don't need a huge range of motion when you're using this one. And then lastly, this is the hardest one, which I would say I don't use very often because it's definitely quite spicy. But this one's good if you're doing things like glute bridges or anything where you don't need much range of motion at all, but it just keeps your legs pressed apart a little bit more. Obviously, there's a ton of these online. I'm sure you could get them in stores as well, but I wasn't able to find any stores close by that I saw that had equipment for working out, so I did get them on Amazon. This was the brand that I got. I can include a link below. That one would be a commission link if you are interested in these, but you can get workout equipment in tons of different stores, so totally optional. The other one that I didn't have for quite a while, I got the bands first, and then I realized I was taking a lot of Pilates classes, and especially not having any dumbbells anymore, I wanted to add a little bit more weight to my arm workouts. So it's these ankle and wrist weights. They look like this, and I figured if anything, they're just easy to travel and bring home if I need to, but they just secure together like this. They're only about, I think, 1.5 pounds each, so it's not a ton of weight, but it just adds a little bit of extra fire to your workout. You just put them on like this, and you can put them on your wrists or your ankles. So if you're doing leg drops or you're doing any sort of arm movements, it just adds a bit more tension to the small muscle groups that you're targeting. I do use them pretty often. They're the only arm weight that I have other than body weight lately. So it's nice to just add a little bit of extra resistance, and they make the exercises a little bit more difficult. So I like these, and they come in this little pouch, which I feel is pretty convenient. I can add a link to these at the bottom as well. Again, that would also be a commission link, but I'm sure you can get weights like these anywhere online as well. For some other tips to stay active and explore a new city that you've traveled to is walk everywhere. I already was a really big walker back in Vancouver. Instead of taking the SkyTrain, I would just walk for an hour or 30 minutes to a studio to work out because I had the time, I had that luxury. I just really like walking, so if it's not your thing, that's totally fine. But it's a really great way to explore the new city or the neighborhood that you've moved in. The architecture here is just absolutely beautiful, and I feel like when you're walking at a slower pace, you can really look up and experience it, or biking is an excellent way to do it. I did have a bike back in Vancouver that I sadly had to sell because I was moving here, but I used to love biking as well if I was doing a little bit of a further trip. Here, I've only rented a bike once. I did the Uber Lime bikes, and that was cool, but I didn't realize they were electric bikes when I first started, so I got it all set up, and then as soon as you pedal, it just shoots you forward. So it's a different way of biking. You don't get as much exercise per se from it. It's still a great exercise, you're moving your legs, but when you're using a manual bike and you're going up a hill, I feel like it's a more intense workout. So this one is just a nice, swift way to check out the city, but my favorite thing is walking. It's just a really great way of moving your body and experiencing the city at the same time. My last and final tip, and I sort of did cover this already, but it's to find a buddy or a group of friends who have similar goals to you. Maybe you don't work out very often already, and a goal of 1 or 2 times a week is an amazing goal. Start there. You can send each other videos, or maybe if you complete the entire week, on Sunday you get together and you get a coffee together. Working out doesn't need to be done on your own. Even though I do work out by myself in my apartment, it still feels like I have this network on Instagram, or if I'm sending a video to a friend, it feels like you have that connection with somebody else. And I think that's the most amazing thing about fitness is you're working on yourself, but you always feel supported like you're with friends. That's my number one tip. If you're just feeling like you're lacking a bit of motivation, find a buddy. For a little behind the scenes and maybe context, if you haven't seen my Instagram stories, this is where I will do my little chitty chat in the mornings. I talk to this mirror and I let people know which workout I've decided to do or why I've chosen the specific one. And I will put it on my laptop here. Sometimes I work out with it on the ground if I'm laying down doing any ab work. But for the elephant in the room, before I go to the other sections, I just want to point out that there are so many smudges on this mirror, and I promise you I have tried to clean it, but I think that this is actually just paint splatter because it looks like they painted the walls and this trim of the mirror at the same time. It was already like this when I moved in, but I did try to clean it because I thought this is very dirty, but it's not. So if you see me moving around in the videos, I'm just trying to avoid the smudges in the mirror. So I chat in the mirror and then I set up my video here. I have my tripod right here. I usually set it up towards this corner. I'll have my mat right in this section. This is my room, welcome. And I just work out right here. So that's behind the scenes. And I just think, why shouldn't working out be something you could just roll out of bed? It's easy, and it doesn't mean I'm never going to go back to working out in a studio. I'm sure I will. Working out with a bunch of people is also really motivating, but for the time being, this is just what works. So here's my behind the scenes, and I'll see you on my Instagram stories. I hope you found this helpful. If you move to a new city or across the entire world, you can still find a way to stay motivated and push yourself. Being in a new country is completely outside of the comfort zone already, so adding on top of that a completely new routine is a little tricky to get used to, but just stick with it. Make a plan that is achievable and makes sense for you, whether it's 1 day a week or 5 days a week. Maybe even it's just going for a walk. It doesn't always have to be an exercise if that's not something you're interested in, but I hope you find that motivation. You can do this. I'll see you in the next one.